Welcome to episode 310 of the Postal Hub podcast. I'm Ian Kerr. Joining me in a moment is sustainable logistics expert Johan Peeters, and we're going to discuss a few things relating to reducing and even eliminating emissions in the last mile. If you haven't already listened to it though, please do check out episode 285, where I speak to Johan at greater length and in more detail about various things relating to urban logistics and reducing emissions. So coming up in just a moment, Johan Peeters on sustainable urban logistics. I'm here with Johan Peeters. Johan is, what would we say, a sustainable logistics expert. Johan, there's a lot of talk about going green in the last mile and what customers want in the last mile. When I say customers, I mean consumers, those people who are buying online. Do you think, or what's your experience with regard to this gap between what consumers say they want, what consumers are prepared to pay for?
Oh, very good question, Ian. They basically carry two hats, and we carry a hat as a consumer, and we carry a hat as an inhabitant or a resident from a village or a city. And what we see there is that we both want two different things. As an inhabitant, we just want to have basically a good environment to live in. Not too many vans in our street, not too many pressure on the roads, and we just want to have a very nice environment. But on the other hand, as a consumer, we often fall for the seduction of free delivery at our doorstep, getting it tomorrow at my door. And there you have it. There you have a very complex situation where you see that there are two things that are very difficult to bring together.
And you sometimes see on social media, don't you, people saying, oh, look, there's a delivery van parked in a cycle lane. Yeah. Yet that person on the bike, well, they might have been ordering that parcel, mightn't they?
They are. Probably they are. But you know, it's never me. It's always my neighbor, right? So in that case, I think there's a big opportunity for logistics players to be a partner for those people wanting to have a different service, for those cities wanting to have a different service. Because look at what's happening in Barcelona. We could very much argue about, is it the right way to tax big companies on this way? But whatever we think of it, it gives a very strong signal, doesn't it? It gives a signal of a city saying, I'm fed up, and the only leverage that I have is putting restrictions out there. So what can we do is listen to that signal and bring solutions forward. And the solutions are very legit and very workable.
Now, when you're talking about logistics and delivery solutions, how can delivery companies prepare themselves for what policymakers, like urban planners and people like that, well, the decisions that they make? You just mentioned Barcelona. We've seen low emission zones, ultra low emission zones. An increasing number of European cities are setting up these, well, let's just call them green zones, shall we? Where they're going to ban the entry of diesel vans in the centre of cities. How can delivery companies prepare for that realistically?
Well, it's not only about diesel vans, it's going to be about all vans. Like urban planners just want to create a city that's developed for humans, not for cars. And let that sink in, because if you look back, we're here in London, beautiful city, but how did it came so far that we are designing our city for cars to pass by, which is quite crazy when you start thinking about it. So what's happening is that if you don't adapt as a logistics player, you basically go bankrupt. We see a lot of stories getting everything from a decentralized system back to a centralized system. We hear stories going from the one who gets the last mile right will be the one winning locally, and who's best suited for that, the one who has the infrastructure. So from a legacy point of view, that would be the mail operators like Royal Mail, like a bpost organization, like Swiss Post, who are organized in a way that you are set up for local distribution. I learned yesterday there's a big railroad underground here. Like, not being used today for parcel distribution anymore. Imagine what a tremendous opportunity that would be to get parcels in underground and distributed by bikes, because that's where it all comes down to. If you want to keep yourself into business, be a partner for a city. Being a partner for a city meaning lowering your impact on the streets, and that's where people will start loving you again. But they don't want to give in service. They don't want to give in their customer experience, and they want to have the same convenience.
So customers aren't going to give up their parcels, and cities are increasingly looking for green delivery options. So that means that the delivery company ends up saying, well, I just buy electric vehicles. Is that as simple as it could be, or do delivery companies need to take a broader perspective on what low emission delivery might be?
As I learned, and I don't have the truth on this, I don't even have the solution. I can just tell you about the experience that I have of working with both parties. Like, listen to each other. Come around, sit around the table and just listen to each other. It's not that hard to come up with solutions when you have time, right? And that is where it's all about. Like, the message of Barcelona, the message of all the other cities like Oslo right now saying like we're gonna ban vehicles from the ring too. Like what you see in Amsterdam happening, what you see happening in Paris, it's like they're all giving the same message. Please be a partner for us and let's work out the solutions. And to answer your question, no, I don't think it's really about just changing the fleet into electric vehicles. It's about thinking through the whole system of how are we using the streets. Like, is it still viable? Like, I expecting the parcel to arrive at my door for free because who's paying for it then? And there's someone doing the job, right? And then at the same hand, how can we lower our impact in terms of using the public domain? And that can be facilitating out-of-home points, it can be parcel shops, it can be parcel automats, but it surely can be a different type of mobility. It can be bikes with bike trailers, cargo bikes. You see these little automated robots running around. I don't know what the future will bring, but definitely it will go in that direction, a less intrusive way of using the streets.
A less intrusive way of using the streets is a really sort of interesting concept. And one of the things that you and I have been discussing when we haven't had the microphone turned on has been around this concept of things like clean air, livable cities, and also when the podcast that released in 2022 was about this idea of the posts and delivery companies also being a part of the city. It's sort of what we were just saying, but also acknowledging that the people who work for the post, so your employees, your subcontractors, your partners, whatever they live in the city as well, right?
Exactly, and that's what the big understanding and the big listening comes from. Because if we look at it and we narrow it down to the human perspective, we all basically want the same thing. And when we try to understand the fact that we're just striving for the same solution, creating a good city to live in, healthy places, a good environment for our kids to grow up in, we just can work together on that and bring the solutions forward.
Now, another project that we've kicked off this year is called Decarbonising Delivery. And Johan, one of the reasons I'm excited about this project is it's bringing together academics, delivery operators, and these, the urban planners, the decision makers. This seems to me that this is. I'm not trying to pump up my own tyres here, everybody, but these are conversations that should have been happening years ago, which we're only just realising now. And one of the urgency that's fueling this is not so much about melting ice caps or glaciers melting or any of these sorts of things. It's about cities have set deadlines. I mean, you just mentioned Oslo. I think the deadline there is 2025 off the top of my head. In the Netherlands, I think it's 30 cities have said by 2025 there'll be no new diesel and petrol-powered vans allowed on the streets. It's a really urgent issue. Putting aside sustainability considerations, it's an urgent commercial issue for the carriers, isn't it?
It is, and if you look at the UN putting out this very clear message about things need to happen and they need to happen right now. There was no update in terms of what can be done in the latest report, but what the message strongly stated was it needs to be done right now. There is no time left. And then everyone is talking about the planet, but what we forget is the planet will survive. It is we that lose. It will be the human race that will be carry the burden upon, and maybe it's the apocalypse. How do you say it?
Apocalypse.
Thank you, Ian. The apocalypse that everyone is talking about in biblical terms.
Yeah, and I think, can we just clarify this though? When you talk about this IPCC report, no matter what your opinion might be of that, the urban planners are reading that and saying that is their cue to do something, isn't it? They're taking that as a cue to act, and that means that we, the delivery sector, will need to act in response to that.
Exactly, and the time is now, and that's the big message. The time is now.
I think the message for delivery companies and in turn e-commerce retailers is urgency is key, and steps need to be taken regardless of your own philosophical perspective. It's because of the lawmakers are forcing us to make change.
It is, and what we just were talking about, like the academics have been researching this, they've put out the technologies there, ready to be implemented. All we need is some brave leaders that actually say, let's do this. The city is willing to. We as inhabitants are supporting this. There is a lot of stakeholders involved in saying, let's move forward. So the only thing we need to do is sit around the table and put the project planning out there, and let's just do this.
I'll put a link to Johan's LinkedIn profile on thepostalhub.com if you want to continue the conversation with Johan to talk about, sustainable urban logistics. Johan Peeters, thanks for joining us on the Postal Hub podcast today.
Thank you, Ian.
Coming soon on the Postal Hub podcast, Helene Boulder-Rai returns to talk about urban warehouses and the idea of being a good neighbour. Also returning soon is Kate Muth, the Executive Director at IMAG, to talk about cross-border parcels and the US Postal Service. Make sure you don't miss any of these great interviews, or any of the other ones, for that matter, that I have yet to record. Subscribe to the Postal Hub podcast so you can hear me laugh at my own jokes every week. Subscribe to the Postal Hub podcast on your favourite podcast platform for starters, and please do give it a rating. You can rate it on your various podcast platforms. Give it 5 out of 5. That'd be awesome. And you can subscribe to the Postal Hub e-newsletter, a weekly newsletter I send out when I release each new episode. Go to thepostalhub.com. You can sign up for the newsletter there. You can sign up for the Daily Delivery Digest as well. And you can also sign up for the Decarbonising Delivery newsletter, all available at thepostalhub.com. If you want to email me about anything at all, my email address is ian@thepostalhub.com. I'm Ian Kerr. Thanks for listening in, and I look forward to your company next time on the Postal Hub podcast.